This coming April, a few content creators and myself will be trying out something new. For the entire month of April, we'll make videos featuring smaller brands in an event called Other Games April. If you're a content creator and would like to be involved, there's a standing open invitation.
Hey there, hobby friends. I'm Jared, and this is Caffeinated Miniatures. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I've just returned from Adepticon, and it was at least as awesome as you hear people say. I had gone with the intention to play, demo, and generally interact with smaller games, rather than the big guy. Aside from some incredible busts and larger scale minis, 3 games stood out to me: Relic Blade, Demon Ship, and Malifaux. And with Miniac leading the charge with Other Games April, there's really no better time to paint some other awesome things. Before I ramble too much about how awesome these smaller, kind of indie games are, let's get some paint on Fluffernutter here. After priming old Fluffers up, I grabbed some black brown and slapped it across the fur. Watching these videos, you might get the impression that I always know what I'm doing, and that just couldn't be further from the truth. Much like with this fur, I generally have no idea what I'm doing. I just kind of try things and figure out what works. So with the fur, I kind of overbrushed light umber over the fur, just using the side of the brush. I wasn't too concerned about keeping the color out of all the recesses. If it got into some of those recesses, it would just kind of add some natural variation to the fur. After mixing in some bright ivory to the light umber, I started using thin, light brush strokes, attempting to emulate hair or fur. Focusing more attention on the ears and around the nose, as these areas would draw a little more attention, I continued mixing in more bright ivory and using smaller brush strokes until the very brightest points were pure ivory. And it looks pretty good, particularly for a gaming piece, so be brave, I guess, and just try. While I paint some of the many details on this mini, let's talk why Other Games April. Judging by all the Warhammer stuff I've got and have painted on this channel, I'm certainly not anti-Games Workshop. However, after spending 5 days surrounded by so many awesome games and wildly creative people, there's just an absolute wealth of awesome non-GW stuff out there. And Malifaux, for instance, was the first war game ever that actually drew my partner in. Some combination of the aesthetics and the mechanics drew her in where no other wargame had previously. And needless to say, I am all in. Anyways, back to painting this awesome model. There were a few metal bits on Fluffers the Bunny here, like this mug, the nameplate, and these things. I have absolutely no idea what they are, but I made the metal. For a straight silvery color, I just used dark neutral gray and white. Starting with straight dark neutral gray and working through some brighter mixes to nearly pure bold titanium white. Moving on to this crazed gremlin riding on top. I painted the rabbit with subdued and desaturated tones as a way of drawing attention to the bright green face of this wild fella. I just have to jump in here quick because these gremlins from Malifaux are absolutely hilarious. They're just obsessed with these humans that have appeared in their world, particularly booze and firearms. Somehow they've determined that humans choose their leaders based on who has the biggest hat and yells the loudest, which is kinda accurate, sadly. This means that gremlin leaders kinda try to out-hat each other, which is just brilliant. Anyways, back to some vibrant gremlin skin. I started by slathering on dark camel green. To brighten up the green, maintaining good vibrancy, I started mixing in some deep yellow. This bright yellow really juices up the green and brings it to life. I continued to add more deep yellow to the mix while building the volumes, until the final highlights were nearly pure yellow. I finished the face before the rest of the skin as a way of ensuring it would be the brightest. I could stop highlighting the rest of the skin a step or two darker than the face. Moving on to the pants, or overalls, I guess. While these minis are generally pretty awesome, some of the details on these pre-built, hard PVC models get a little murky. Regardless, for a dark denim color, I started with a base coat of blue-black. Then started some quick crosshatch kind of highlights with dark gray-blue. Adding some ivory to the dark gray-blue, I wrapped up the pants with some final dots and marks. You'll most often see me working from dark to light in this way. It's just kind of what seems to make sense in my smooth brain. And it certainly doesn't mean it's better than any other way. It's just what works for me, particularly with fairly quickly painted gaming pieces. I encourage you to try things out and see what works for you. There's no right or wrong way to paint little plastic war dollies. Then just paint some quick, sketchy wood grain on the stock of the rifle. Make the metal mostly metallic. Paint up the strap and we can paint some rabbit eyes. I went on to the old Google machine to find a rabbit eye reference and found a steely blue image I liked. Then I used some dark gray blue that was on the palette and drew some fine lines on the eye, going around in a circle. Then intersperse some finer, lighter lines by adding some white to the blue. Once that looked about right, I cleaned up the inner circle with black and added a specular highlight with white. I wanted the base to be a boggy kind of green to balance out the bright green gremlin up top. So after spreading out some texture paste, I covered it with a pretty diluted camel green. Then immediately added some Agrax Earthshade, blending the two until it looked about right. These models all seem to have single, sketchy contact points on the base. So prior to gluing, I drilled a hole in the foot, gluing a piece of wire in. And I left it fairly long, which gave me the ability to bend it over on the underside of the base, giving it some much needed strength. And after all that, here is Fluffernutter. And there you go, my first of many Malifaux minis. It's a wonderful game with an incredible aesthetic. The core gameplay is pretty easy to pick up, but there is a solid amount of depth to it. And most importantly, all of the rules are free. Yeah, you heard that. Free. Just download the iOS or Android app and it is all there. Again, for free. If you're interested in learning more about the lore, the gameplay, or how to get started, I highly recommend checking out Corner Case, Defective Dice, Danger Planet, and of course Ash at Guerrilla Miniature Games here on YouTube. They've each got a wealth of high quality Malifaux content, and I'd encourage you to check them out. And of course, big shout out to Miniac for leading the charge with Other Games April. What do you think of Malifaux? Are there other game systems that you're interested in? Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you made it this far, you are an absolute legend. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more mediocre hobby content. And thanks for watching. You are awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.